Kyle Trask looked good in his start for the Buccaneers against the Jets, but in the end, it doesn't really matter. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live immediate reaction episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day, or in this case, your first listen or view immediately following the Buccaneers preseason win against the New York Jets. Don't forget, you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, on Twitter at @JYarcho_Bucs. And we are here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, we want to share our appreciation for your continued support of the show. This episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Plenty of takeaways and a player that is on the cusp of losing his roster spot, but that's coming up a little bit later. First, we need to talk about Kyle Trask's performance against the Jets on Saturday night. Trask finished his initial night going 16 for 23 for 123 yards, a touchdown, and being sacked once. I say initial because third-string quarterback John Wolford, unfortunately, was injured when he came into the game in the second half. He was stretchered off the field. Now, all reports are that he has movement in all of his extremities. Everything is fine, but he did suffer a neck injury, and the Buccaneers put Kyle Trask back onto the football field to replace John Wolford. So his night actually finished going 20 for 28 for 218 yards, one touchdown, and being sacked twice. I do believe in my bold prediction that I said that the Trask Mayfield duo would both go for 75% completion percentage, at least one touchdown, no turnovers. So close to that 75% from Kyle Trask. And it would have been well over 75% if his wide receivers didn't have a case of the dropsies. So a couple of really nice passes from Kyle Trask end up being dropped by their intended receivers. But overall, Kyle Trask looked really, really sharp. He was focused. He seemed to have a command of the offense. He really, truly looked good. And as I mentioned, his stats would be better if it weren't for a couple of bad drops. But for the second week in a row now, Kyle Trask had some absolute lasers, some darts to receivers on third downs, converting those third downs with some absolutely fantastic passes. I felt a couple of times he was hyper-focused on getting the ball to Devin Tompkins, much to Tompkins' demise, essentially. I don't know how many of you were paying attention or able to watch the game. Devin Tompkins took not one, not two, but three different shots to the head. One of them was on a kick return, but two of them were as a receiver, and there were no penalties there. Again, you're talking about these split-second things, but Devin Tompkins was getting hit above the shoulders, and he was getting hit hard. But it seemed like getting the ball to Devin Tompkins was a big part of the game plan for this offense. Maybe they are trying to test him out as that wide receiver 3, trying to force feed him the ball, get him some extra work because he's going to be that guy. On the flip side, as David texted me during the game, when you throw the ball to Trey Palmer, good things happen. Kyle Trask, there were a lot of really short to not even fully intermediate throws by Trask early in the game. And the first time that he really looked to go deep, what does he do? He finds Trey Palmer for his second touchdown in as many weeks. And what I said to David was that for where Trey Palmer was, the ball was a little bit underthrown, but I'm not going to sit here and knock Kyle Trask for that, because overall, it was a beautiful pass. It was perfectly placed over the outstretched arms of the defender. It's just that Trey Palmer, he's a little bit fast. And so he actually got behind where the ball was going, made a really nice adjustment, a really nice play, batted the ball to himself, pulls it down for the touchdown. So I'm not going to knock Kyle Trask for kind of underthrowing Trey Palmer, because the placement of the football was absolutely spot on. So all in all, a really solid performance from Kyle Trask in the first half of this game. And even when he came in the second half, he threw 5 more passes than I would have wanted him to. Spoiler alert, that's how many passes he threw when he came in of relief of John Wolford. But I even tweeted out, I said, all I want to see Kyle Trask do the rest of this game is turn around and hand the ball off. Do not put Trask at risk after just losing John Wolford. And I think Trask answered the call. He did a really, really good job. Before we get to the break, I do want to jump over to the live chat. You guys are going off. Sal319, he says, Trask. Pluty, no days off for James. That's right. We are your daily podcast. I'm here for you guys. And then let's see. We got Sal chiming in about the wide receivers. He says, number 1 is Evans. Number 2 is Godwin. Number 3 is Trey Palmer. Number 4, Raheem Jarrett. We'll talk about Raheem Jarrett coming up in a little bit. What else do we have? Let's see. We have somebody saying, stellar and shines are overstatements. Trask was still doing many of the same things wrong, and his better performance later in the game against third and fifth stringers. You know, having watched Kyle Trask numerous times in training camp since he was a rookie, I'm going to use the terms stellar and shines, because not only did he perform well on the field against the Jets, he is growing as a quarterback. He is improving. And I think a lot of the people in the comment section or those that are listening on delay would agree. I have been one of the most critical of Kyle Trask, and he has proved me wrong quite a bit this offseason in his development and his growth as an NFL quarterback. I think he's doing a phenomenal job compared to where I've seen him and where I thought he was going to be at this stage in his career. Kyle Trask is really starting to come into his own. So I'm going to give him his shine when he deserves it. We got Lawrence in the chat. I'm mad I missed the game. Don't be mad that you missed the game. For the most part, it was kind of lackluster, kind of boring. The Bucs do win 13-6. Lots of mistakes on both sides of the football for both teams, but still plenty of takeaways from this game, both good and bad. We are going to talk more about the offensive line play in front of Trask throughout the night, as well as how a solid night from Kyle Trask is ultimately going to prove to be futile. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's super easy to create a job post on LinkedIn Jobs, and you do it for free. You add your job, you add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. Your time is precious. The candidate's time is precious. Don't waste your time on candidates that aren't going to fit what you're looking for. This is why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. And a special shout out to all of our everydayers, and an even more special shout out to all of you in the live YouTube chat. All of this interaction, all these viewers for a preseason reaction. I love it. Just remember, I'm in preseason mode too. I got to get back into the swing of this whole live thing and kind of producing my own show with the graphics and all that. So bear with me. There might be some mistakes. I got to get into regular season form as well. But I have plenty of takeaways from this game against the New York Jets. Some are good, some are bad, but we have to start with the biggest thing. And for all the love that I just gave Kyle Trask, because he deserves it, he earned it, he played really, really well. As I'm doing this, as you guys are watching me, we have the post-game media availability with Todd Bowles and the players and all that. So this may have already been announced by the time I'm saying it. But if not, Baker Mayfield is going to be the starter on this team. We talked about it earlier in the week because of Ira Kaufman's report. If you take a look at the situation, if you read the tea leaves, you read between the lines, whatever cliche you want to use, Baker Mayfield, along with pretty much every other starter outside of Luke Gedeke, Cody Mauch, and then you have Nick Leverett out there competing with Robert Hainsey for that starting center job, none of them played. You didn't have starters on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't have starters on the offensive side of the ball. We knew Kyle Trask was going to get the start. What we all kind of assumed, what we all kind of thought was that it was going to be a lot like the Pittsburgh game. Kyle Trask was going to get the start, then Baker Mayfield gets to come in, and we'll see what happens. It looks like pretty much Baker Mayfield, signed, sealed, delivered, is going to be your starter. Otherwise, there would have been no reason not to play him in this. Speaking of Cody Mauch and Luke Gedeke and Nick Leverett, and you had Aaron Stinney out there, the offensive line was still a mess. David harped on it quite a bit on yesterday's episode. If you have not heard that or watched that, I do recommend you go back and you do so. But he harped about the fact that this offensive line has to build chemistry, and you're not going to build chemistry when you don't have your starting five out there. And I understand, and David understands, and all of you understand that there is a battle going on for who is going to start the season at center because Ryan Jensen is not available. Is it going to be Robert Hainsey? Is it going to be Nick Leverett? That's all well and good. We talked about the solution for that. You have to have Wirfs and Filer out there on the left side of the line. You have to have Mauch and Gedeke on the right side of the line. You start one of them, Leverett or Hainsey, at center. You let them play a quarter. Then you bring in the other one to play with the rest of the starting offensive line. These guys have to build chemistry. Our everydayers, our every yearers know, I've talked about this numerous times. An offensive line is like an orchestra. You have to trust that all the other instrument groups are going to do their part. They're going to come in on time, and they're going to fulfill their role. When you have 5 different instrument groups playing 5 different things at the same time, it doesn't work. And this offensive line is gaining absolutely no chemistry, absolutely no trust in each other because they're not playing together. Game reps are different than practice reps, and you're not going to build the chemistry and the trust until you have game reps. And you don't want those reps to come in week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. All 5 starting offensive linemen have to play together because right now it is a hot mess. It's got to get fixed, or it doesn't matter if it's Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask taking the snaps, they are going to get rocked. You have to see the O-line together. I will not stop pounding that drum. But let's talk about somebody else that wasn't on the field. And I'm going to talk more about this position group coming up in a little bit, but no Chase Edmonds in this game. And I'm looking at that similarly to how I look at the Baker Mayfield situation. Did Chase Edmonds do enough in that first preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers on top of what he's been doing in training camp to solidify the RB2 position behind Rachaad White? You saw every running back that the Bucs have on this roster take snaps except for Rachaad White and Chase Edmonds. To me, that's a sign that we're looking at Chase Edmonds as the RB2. You all know how I feel about Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker is that dude. He had a really solid night against the New York Jets, and I think he's going to be the RB2 by the midway point of the season. But right now, with the lack of Edmonds being on the field, I think you're looking at Edmonds as being the RB2 heading into this season. Real quick, I'm going to jump into the chat before I move on. What happened with Vaughn? It says Adventure is out there. Adventure is out there. We're going to get to that. Stay tuned. Stick with me. We have G Vegas. Unfortunate circumstances to Wolford, but Trask stepped up and showed a lot. I agree 100% G Vegas. He's one of our regular live YouTube chat guys. Sal319, give me Tucker. Absolutely. A couple of bright spots. KJ Britt has been outstanding through 2 preseason games. There's no doubt about it. I really hope that hamstring injury that he suffered against the Jets is not serious, because this guy is playing at a higher level than he has played since joining the Buccaneers, since entering the NFL. Again, much like I said about Trask, he's really coming into his own now as an NFL player. I've loved what I've seen out of him so far. Did not like to hear that he left the game with a hamstring injury. Much, much better on penalties. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. As soon as that opening kickoff happened, the Bucs had 2 penalties called against them on the opening kickoff. One was holding, one was an illegal double team block. After that, the Bucs played a pretty clean first half. They finished the first half with just 2 penalties for 20 yards. They finished the game 7 penalties for 67 yards. They had back-to-back holding calls on the offensive line there in the second half. That's not good, but overall, a vast improvement on the penalty front. They finished with fewer penalties and fewer penalty yards than the Jets did. They finished with about half of their penalties and penalty yards from last week. Big improvement. Like to see that. The wide receiver 3 job, still wide open. Like I mentioned with Kyle Trask kind of hyper-targeting Devin Tompkins early on in the game. Not a lot came of that. Beautiful touchdown pass to Trey Palmer. And now Raheem Jarrett is throwing his hat in the ring. Raheem Jarrett, he was a guy that Logan Robinson of Bucs Game Day talked about on this show that was turning a lot of heads in rookie minicamp and OTAs. Now he's starting to get the opportunity. I think Raheem Jarrett makes this football team, maybe not as the wide receiver 3, but he's certainly going to earn some playing time in the regular season. But this wide receiver 3 job is wide open. And even though I said that it probably is going to end up Tompkins, I'm starting to lean on David's side and go a little bit towards Palmer. Palmer just brings a different element to the game, and his chemistry, it doesn't matter what quarterback is in there, he is able to connect with either one of them. They both trust Palmer. They both believe in him, and they've both thrown him a touchdown pass at this point. Finally, the last big takeaway that I'm going to mention here is that you're probably looking at Chase McLaughlin as the kicker. He is going to win that competition. Blankenship missed 2 kicks on Saturday night against the Jets. 1 from 55. Okay, that's fine. You're not going to find many, if any, kickers that are going to nail all of their 50-plus yarders. But then he also shanked one from 32 yards out. That's not good. That is not good at all. McLaughlin has been outperforming him in training camp. He's been outperforming him in games. Looks like that's going to be the guy to end up winning the kicker competition. But we've talked about Sean Tucker. We've talked about Chase Edmonds. But now we have to talk about a guy that may have played his way off of the roster. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a live reaction episode of the Locked On Bucs podcast, talking about Tampa Bay's 13-6 victory over the New York New York Jets. And look, I'm going to be 100% honest about this. Ooh, real quick, you guys know I have to do this. Brent in the chat, Cade Otton played good tonight. That's my guy. Cade Otton did have a really good start to this game. You guys know I am a Cade Otton guy. Couple of really nice catches on that opening drive to move the sticks. His connection with Kyle Trask was really good. I expect a lot out of Otton this season. But back to the conversation at hand. I like Keyshawn Vaughn. I do. He's a genuinely nice guy. He's been on this team for a couple of years now, but I don't think he's going to be on this team moving forward. In two preseason starts, and again, it's not all on him. It can't all be on him. If I'm going to sit here and criticize the offensive line and their play, some of this is on them. But look, in two preseason games now, Keyshawn Vaughn has finished with less than 1 yard per carry in both games. Keyshawn Vaughn had 4 carries on Saturday for -8 yards. His first 2 carries went for -9 yards. So that means he had 2 more carries after that where he got a half yard each. So you have Rachaad White. You have Chase Edmonds. You have Sean Tucker, who looked fantastic. After that, are they going to stick with Keyshawn Vaughn, or do you give Ronnie Brown an opportunity? Do you give Patrick Laird an opportunity? Do you weigh what Brown and Laird bring to this team on special teams? And that's going to be the thing that pushes Keyshawn Vaughn off of this roster. This was his opportunity to step up and take the reins and be a legitimate contributing member to the offense. He didn't get to see a lot of time over the last couple of years because there was Leonard Fournette, because there was Ronald Jones, because there was Rachaad White. He wasn't getting those opportunities. Now he had the chance to be in competition to be the number 2 guy behind Rachaad White, and all he's done is go the wrong way after the ball is snapped. If you can't trust him to gain positive yardage, or at the very least, get back to the line of scrimmage, what makes you think that he's going to do any different in the regular season when he's out there against fully fledged starting defenses? Now, he faced essentially the Steelers' starting defense last week. This week, he's getting pushed backwards every time he touches the ball, and there's no Quinnen Williams out there. The Jets weren't playing all of their starters on defense. What's going to happen when he goes up against the Saints defensive line? When he goes up against the Eagles defensive line? He's going to keep moving backwards. So either Keyshawn Vaughn has to get this thing figured out. Dave Canales has to get something figured out that's going to utilize Vaughn in a positive manner where you're actually moving the ball when he gets his number called, or you have to move on. And is Keyshawn Vaughn an important enough player that Dave Canales has to build part of his playbook around just to generate an opportunity for him to gain positive yards? Or are you going to say, you know what? We got Ronnie Brown. We got Patrick Laird. These guys can battle it out for running back 4 because Keyshawn Vaughn's not going to pass Sean Tucker at this point. He's not even going to get to RB3 status, let alone pass up Chase Edmonds for RB2. And again, I like Vaughn. I thought he was a solid pick when the Bucs took him a couple of years ago. He had some great college film. He's had a couple of moments with the Buccaneers where you've gone, oh, okay, if we can get that consistently, the Bucs might have something here. But those moments are too far and few between. And when you're seeing him go up against backup defenses and backup defensive lines, and he's not taking advantage, it's going to be a situation where he's not going to help you in the regular season either. And I hate to say it because I would have loved to have seen more of the positive Keyshawn Vaughn that we've gotten in the past on the field and on this roster. But right now, he's just not showing it. I'm going to jump over to the chat for a few more comments here. We got Watch More All 22 saying Otten recovered that Trask fumble pass. Yep, that was a big moment there. That was kind of a weird play, but I'm not going to put that one on Kyle Trask. It wasn't that he held the ball too long. It was poor protection. It was great timing by the Jets defensive lineman, and then Cade Otton on the spot handled business, recovered the fumble. So you love to see stuff like that. G Vegas says Keyshawn, he gone, just has not shown anything positive these 2 preseason games. I agree absolutely. Matt Ferguson in the chat, Blankenship had a rough night. He did. And I go back and I almost wonder when the Bucs did that hurry up at the end of the first half and they rushed him out there and he had to rush a 60-yard kick before time expired. Of course, flags flew everywhere, but they were negated because the clock had already hit 0. Did that kind of mess with his confidence a little bit? Because overall, I mean, Blankenship has done a pretty decent job in training camp. He's missed some here and there, but every kicker will. But he looked good last week against the Steelers. Then he kicks that rushed 60-yard job, and then all of a sudden, he misses his 2 kicks in the second half. I didn't like to see that. You knew you were out of time. It was better to just forego that. I really like Rodrigo Blankenship a lot. I hope that didn't crush his confidence, but I just don't see him winning this kicker competition anymore. Danny Mercado says, interesting to see Hard Knocks this week with the Bucs. I'm thinking the same thing. I don't know about all of you in the chat. I've had enough of Aaron Rodgers. I'm on it's burnout for me now. I'm tired of hearing about him. I'm tired of listening to him talk. I'm tired of every story being about him. So I haven't watched Hard Knocks. But given all the fights that happened in the singular joint practice that they had with the Jets, to the point that Mike Evans has said he has never seen this many scuffles break out in a joint practice in his entire career, I'm real interested to see this episode. So I will turn in for that one. But yeah, the rest of them, I don't care. I could not care less about Aaron Rodgers or what he has to say or do. Matt also says defense still needs to get better pressure. They will. There's no doubt in my mind they absolutely will. We haven't seen the starting defense yet. I thought Anthony Nelson, he had one real bad play where Zach Wilson was able to scramble for 7.5 miles. But other than that, he had a pretty decent night. As I mentioned, KJ Britt has been playing superb football, leaves with a hamstring injury. Cam Gill has had a couple of flash moments. D. Delaney with some flashy moments. He had a big interception in the end zone where he got his foot underneath the ball before it touched the ground and was able to catch it. The pressure will come. Don't worry about that. You get Vita out there. You get Cansey. You still got Greg Gaines. You still have Devin and Levante and Shaq and Joe Tryon, Shoyinka. The pass rush will get there. Don't stress about that one too much in the preseason. Danny says Vaughn will be practice squad. He's still valuable. It's a long season. I don't disagree with you there, but remember, on the practice squad, other teams can pluck you. I know you can protect a couple of guys each week, but if you protect a guy too many times, now all of a sudden he has to be called up to your main roster. Otherwise, he becomes a free agent. It's possible that he ends up on the practice squad and still ends up becoming a viable member of the offense. I'm just not seeing it right now. Goat in the chat says Vaughn ain't it. Right now, he's not. I hope he turns it around. I really, truly do. Because again, I like him. He's a nice guy. And when he makes some solid plays, they're really impressive. But again, they're just too far and few between right now. I can't trust him as the running back on the football field for the Buccaneers when they have other options that are far and away better and smarter options on the field. With that, I am going to bid you all a fair adieu. I want to thank each and every one of you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. And I especially want to thank all of you in the chat. Having this much interaction, this much viewership on a live reaction to a pregame or a preseason game is awesome. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you have any questions, reactions, thoughts, anything at all, of course, you can drop them in the YouTube comments, or you can email us at lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com. You can DM us at lockedonbucks on Twitter. Check out everything that I'm doing over at bucksnation.com. Check out David's work over at Bucs Nation or at bucksgameday.com. I'm at Bucs Nation. He's at Bucs Game Day. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Yarcho_Bucs, at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding rest of your weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.